Roz Verges, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. All right. Before we get into this, which I'm really excited about, I have to do my disclosure. So let's give me 30 seconds for this. eWealth Partners is an investment advisor registered with the state of Minnesota. The information in this podcast is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration the listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific, individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. Determine what strategies or investments may be suitable for you and consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision. So, Roz, we've known each other. Gosh, you first helped me out with our consulting work, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and we kind of reconnected over these last few months. And it has just been fascinating how both of our businesses have grown and just, really where you've grown your business on the consulting side, where now you work almost exclusively with roofing business owners, correct? And
Yeah,
is that okay? And
yeah, right.
now talk me through what are some of the biggest challenges they face when they try to grow, and obviously how are you helping them?
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny about that question, Brian, is I think the challenges that they experience, the biggest hurdles are really the same ones that we have in
Yeah.
any business.
Hmm.
Like you said, when I started, I was kind of working broadly with all kinds of different companies. And I have really found that, the same principles apply to just about any industry, but having that industry specific knowledge just makes you even better. But yeah, really not going to be surprising. Salespeople and money, right? Really understanding and knowing your financial numbers. Those are the across the board, the challenges people run into.
Is that where you think most of these roofing business owners feel stuck? Is with salespeople, with money, and where do they feel stuck? And I guess let's talk through the breakthrough.
Yeah. I think really, the stages or kind of places in an organization that they tend to feel stuck varies, but really I would say that it's determined by kind of their stage of growth. So, one thing that I have learned and actually done a lot of studying and research on in my career is kind of this evolution of how businesses grow over time. And in the roofing industry specifically, we see owners, leaders really have a challenge at kind of these four core barriers, I would call them, between the different five stages. And so the first barrier is often just trying to get over to that first $1 million, right? Like
Yeah.
we're hustling, we're out there trying to get the work done. And that first million is really one of the core areas we kind of hit that first roadblock.
Yeah.
And then I would say the next one is from 1 to 4 million, then from 4 to 10. And then the last one, that kind of fourth barrier trying to get through, is figuring out how you're going to leave a legacy and exit the building.
Okay. How did you even come up with those numbers? I'm in my industry, I know they have certain numbers now. They're different, but where does that even come from? Is it just okay, you've worked with enough that you kind of understand? Because I mean, it's really helpful when
Yeah.
we're growing our business to know, okay, we're X amount million or this close to that, that likely we're going to anticipate these type of challenges. But where do you even get those numbers, or how did that come about?
Yeah. That's a great point, Brian. I think it really is just from seeing and studying and watching it happen. But if you think about it, it's like each of those barriers or each of those kind of qualifying areas, what happens is like there's a point at like 1 million, 4 million, 10 million, where they just like what used to work doesn't really work anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I would mostly say those numbers come from is like that's kind of when that general time period that we see that like the systems, processes, people, like how they were doing it just doesn't quite function for the roofing industry when they get to about those benchmarks. Yep.
And I'm sure that at each of those barriers, the people part of it, right? The who our team, and it's
Yeah.
going to look different at each of those barriers. And I know you have a quite extensive background with kind of the people side of business and HR and culture.
Yep.
But talk through kind of those leadership challenges in their company, and what's the real cost if they don't really figure that out in the early stage.
Yeah. Yep. Especially in our industry, not overcoming some of these challenges can literally cost owners millions of dollars in
Hmm.
revenue. when you think about burnout, inconsistent revenue, employee turnover, and missed opportunities for growth, those are major contributors. And organizations that are investing in things like leadership training and development, when they're getting those right pieces and practices in place, they see a 20 to 30% higher revenue than companies that aren't investing. Years ago, Harvard Business Review did a study, and like companies that invest in their culture tend to 4x on every dollar invested. So $1 in, 4 times that back into your business. So there's very real dollars. So I would say the other way, right? Like if you're not investing in it, then you're losing out on that 4x, which is really costly. It's the opportunity cost there that you could be missing out on too. I'm sure there's not an owner out there that can't point to an experience that they've had where they knew like they didn't handle it well, or they didn't have the right piece or process in place. Maybe it resulted in poor customer service. Maybe it resulted in job just inefficiency with doing their production, that I bet they could look at and point to actual dollars. So I always encourage people, I don't know what business the listener is looking at or thinking about today, but I would take the time to start to actually assess and put some numbers to it. How many projects did you struggle with last year? How many employees did you lose last year? Those things actually have dollar impacts. And if you can start to understand your dollars that really are kind of being missed by not doing these things, it can be a great motivator to invest in processes and ways to help you overcome those challenges. Yeah.
Because you've mentioned before that oftentimes the business owner is focused, we'll say, probably too much on getting the new customer, right? When they should actually bring it back a bit and emphasize building the right team, the right culture. That's a scary thought just as a business owner. They're both investments, right? But I guess I could understand that if you don't build the right team that can support that customer, then things just start falling apart.
Yeah.
And my guess is that a lot of these, if they built the business from scratch, that's what they know, and how they built it is they would just go out and do sales, and then that's all they know. And building a team is a lot probably more difficult for them compared to that. I don't know. Talk through that a little bit more, of just a scary thought. When do we maybe not focus as much energy on the sales part, but now we need to focus the time and investment on building out the team?
Yeah, Brian. And I just, as a business owner, can so relate, right? I
Yeah.
know how challenging it is because it really takes discipline. It's so easy to see like the next thing that you're going to do instead of kind of taking a step back and looking and seeing long term, and really focusing your attention and your time on little steps each week that can help you create a sustainable business. And I think that's the difference, right? I kind of think about it like riding a bicycle. When we were kids and we'd ride our bikes, and you have kids, Brian, I don't know, maybe you've experienced this, but I remember my daughter like getting too big for her bike, right?
Yeah,
And she'd
sure.
ride on her bicycle and it was just like so wonky, and her knees were like
Yeah,
up in her armpits.
right.
And as business owners, I feel like that's kind of what we do if we don't pause and really pay attention to these different growth
That's
needs
good.
we have in our business, right? Because it's like you can
Hmm.
still move forward. You can for sure still keep going, but it's going to be wonky, and it's not going to be as fast as if you just start to think about like what's it going to take for me to upgrade to my next
Ah,
bike price.
I'm
And
picturing this in my head, and it actually is a good story of just, okay, now you actually have to invest in the new bike, maybe the 10 speed type of thing, right? So that's going to set you back just financially a little bit to invest in that. And now you're going to have to teach your child, like, how to use this new 10 speed, which we're doing with our oldest now. And that's going to take some time and investment. But once that's done, they're going to go so much further, right? And so it's one of those things. And at the same time, is like you said, it's not like growth or sales are going to stop. That's a fear. That's likely not a real fear of what actually is going to happen. They might slow for a pace, but that's just going to allow for you to accelerate. So, all right. Well, that's actually, I like that analogy. So,
great.
you work with a lot of roofing businesses just through what you do at Refinery. How about a success story of a company that overcame major growth challenges? Those are always kind of fun to hear.
Sure. There's a really easy top of mind one for me. A client who came to me last year, and I will be honest, like this is kind of a hard story. So when this owner and I because of kind of the sensitive nature of this story, I'm gonna refrain from saying the owner's name.
Yeah.
But when the owner came to me and we first met, it was the beginning of last year, and they disclosed to me that they had not been profitable for the last 2 years in their business. They had started really successfully. They were making revenue, but they weren't making profit. And because of that, they weren't able to give their team members any additional increases. Their team members were working really hard, so their team was starting to get really discouraged. They felt like they had tried everything. He even told me that they were running EOS and they just weren't seeing the results. And honestly, like when we first started talking at the beginning of last year, I didn't know if we were going to even be able to work together because he didn't know if he was going to be able to afford it. He was concerned about if it was a good financial decision to invest in this coaching when he already felt like, gosh, we're just trying to so hard to turn a profit. I don't even know if I can pay you.
Mhm.
Right. And so we worked together kind of through that early on planning. We had a lot of discussions back and forth. We talked about some different kind of financial options for him to help him get started. And I ended up going out and meeting with his team. And I really would just wanted to start and like, let's just see if this is a good fit before you even invest a penny, you know? So I went out, I met with his team. We all kind of really just gelled and connected really well. And so he decided to go ahead and bring me on. So it was a huge risk for him
Yeah.
to make that investment. And so really, you know, when I start working with any team, I start with discovery. So I spent a lot of time in our early, well, not a lot of time, but initially like our first really month and a half was dedicated to just doing deep dive discovery into his business. I really wanted to understand like, how is everything working? What's going on with your team? We did some great workshops with his team where they got a chance to share what their experiences were like. We did surveys, just kind of the whole 9 yards to do a
Yeah.
lot of information gathering because where some people as coaches kind of have like a set model that they plan out every single time and it's like the same one. In my business, which is Refinery, we really go through, I have a ton of different training in things like the 4 disciplines of execution, EOS, like all of these different operating systems. And so we have a process that we follow to help businesses succeed, but we really try to make sure we're customizing and not just kind of doing a one size fits all solution. So we did this deep dive discovery, and really quickly we were able to identify some roadblocks that were keeping his team back. We started addressing the team dysfunction. We did those workshops together as a team on a monthly basis so that the team got to provide buy-in, their input. We stood up their weekly L10 for all of my EOS L10.
Yeah.
Like I said, he had been doing an L10, but we took it, I've kind of modified how I run L10s with teams.
Yeah.
So we made it more effective. We made sure that they actually had a really good scoreboard. We looked at their metrics to make sure that they were actually measuring what mattered for their business. And we really started to create that accountability. We gave their team members a chance to be heard and focused on what was really mattering to move the business forward rather than just this like broad brushstroke themes of
Hmm.
like, oh, our customer service is terrible, or oh, we're really struggling with this. We actually were able to get specific into like what are the real challenges behind the customer service challenges. And so we did a lot of root cause analysis. And then I continued to meet with the owner on, we would meet for 30 minutes every week. So when I
Hmm.
work with teams, I really become like a part of their team, kind of like a fractional COO, where we just dive deep into the business. And I'm so excited to share, Brian, that at the end of 2024, they were profitable for the first.
Oh, wow.
So it was just huge and it was so great. And they're going to be re-engaging me here in May to make sure that they can do it again in 2025.
Yeah, and you talk about just the investment in the team. And it's like for most business owners, it's not like you want bad company culture. You want great company culture and you want to understand where we are dysfunctional as a team. But what's hard is how do we actually facilitate that conversation around it, right? Most business owners aren't necessarily trained in how to do that. So I could see where a third party, a coach, a consultant like you, and just facilitating that conversation, and probably where the team is just more comfortable voicing that to someone like yourself compared directly to the owner. I'm sure is extremely valuable for the team. And then you can basically, if it's said before, in front of the business owner or behind the scenes, is almost play translator of what this now means as a business owner. Is that a fair way of kind of thinking through it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely, Brian. It gives people each a place that has an appropriate spot for their voice, right? So the team members actually have a chance to share and be heard and move things forward. And the owner, because we meet one to one, they get a chance to share what their challenges are and what they're really struggling with someone who can help them process and have those really difficult conversations with team members when they need to have them. So yeah, it creates a lot of security for honesty.
Yeah. I used to have pushback myself personally on the whole company culture thing because I thought it was too like kumbaya, just whatever, and almost just this inauthentic piece. But if you just boil it down, like you want to be at a place that you actually just enjoy the work that you're doing and you're for it. And that's just another way of, okay, like I like showing up here, right? Yeah, it's work and sometimes it's difficult type of thing. And it doesn't mean like this company culture is nothing daisies and
Yeah.
fairy tales type of thing. That may not be part of your company culture. And so kind of when I've just repositioned that, it made more sense of like just create a place where people want to show up and they enjoy that. And so I was like, okay, that softened a bit for me. So all right,
Yeah.
so let's go through this now. So what do you think the biggest mindset change that these business owners need to go through for the successful growth? It's probably, I guess, one around people, but like, what is the mindset shift that they're going through?
Yeah, well, I love that you talked about culture because I think that's a big piece of it. And really it's, understanding that what worked in your last stage isn't going to be sustainable in your next stage. So you have to be willing to let go while protecting your culture. I've got kids, so I'm gonna share this story about Lincoln, my son, who's turning 10 this week, this Friday.
Wow,
Shout out to my
happy
son.
birthday.
Yeah, so Lincoln is very sentimental, and he had this blue t-shirt forever that he just loved. He's a baseball player. The shirt had a baseball player on it. And he like wanted to hold on to that shirt so long and so hard. He was like so unwilling to let it go. And he's a big kid. And so it started to get really, oh, dude, we got to move on.
Yeah,
And that was really hard for him because he really cared and like he wanted it to be the same way that it always was.
yeah,
So we talked about it and we were like, okay, well, what are some of the things that you love about your shirt? He loved that it was blue. He loved that it had a baseball player on it. Did we need to keep the ketchup and mustard stains? Probably not, right? So we upgraded him to a shirt that fit, similar to the bicycle, right? But we made sure that we kept the parts that mattered to him, right? He wanted it to feel good. He didn't want a scratchy cotton shirt. He wanted one that was
yeah.
key. And so I think as business owners, like we have to be willing to let go of that last stage and be willing to say, like, okay, I am moving into this new stage and it is going to look a little different. It's not going to be exactly the same. But like the core elements of what made it special to you, what made it great, that's what we want to preserve in that next stage. And so I think kind of if you can use that metaphor as a business owner to think about your business, what are the ketchup and mustard stains that you're going to leave behind on the old shirt?
Yeah.
And what are the things that you want to make sure that you preserve that really make it special to you? Because I think that's what makes it special to you and to your team members. Like that's why people are going to stay and want to move into that next stage of business with you too.
I see. I totally thought you were going to say he was going to rip off the sleeves and make it a muscle belly shirt, and that could it'd be
I mean,
another way of doing
actually, like, okay, I don't know what the temperature is in Minnesota right now. I think
it.
he went in a sleeveless t-shirt today. Josh, he
Yeah,
shorts. My husband was like, no, you have to go put on leggings underneath your shorts because he's a bro, so he's
yeah.
leggings under his shorts. And so because Josh made him put on leggings, he changed his shirt
How
from a normal
funny.
shirt into a cut off sleeve. My
It's
husband,
like, yeah, it's
we
almost
weren't
like
far off,
45.
right?
It's practically summer here. So
Yeah, yeah,
too funny.
not far off.
All right, let's go back to you and I've seen this visual before. It's great. So let's share that for the audience. But you talk about the 5 stages of business growth. Can you share that and walk us through that? So obviously, we got the audio here, but for any of the listeners, you can
Yeah.
also see the video, and we'll put this in the show notes too. But talk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So really that first stage is kind of that startup stage in the roofing industry. We call it Chuck in a truck or Jan in a van.
I like
It's
it.
really just that like one person show. They're out there, they're getting the work done. And usually at this stage, you are the one who's doing it all. You're really maxing out your capacity. And this is probably when you're in that 0 to 1.5 million. You haven't broken through that first stage yet. And so when you're in this first stage, some of the core needs that you will have as you're getting ready to go is you really need to start documenting your processes. Usually at that tension point for people when they're trying to go from one to the next stage, which we'll talk about, is that they don't know what they should start letting go of and who to hire first. A lot of times is the question that I get at that stage is, oh, I'm totally maxed out. Who do I hire first? And usually we want to start by identifying what we could be taking off of our plate. We can save it for the next podcast, but there's a ton that you can do with AI to help that. Maybe that can help you delay hiring a little bit, but that's really at that first stage. You want to start documenting your processes and starting to figure out what you can let go of. And then we move into the next stage, which is the friends and family stage. And friends and family is when we're going to start to expand our opportunities. So we started this business, we're having success. And that's exciting, right? Brian, you went through this where you're like, this is great. I like this. I think I want to add some people to my team. And so we usually start with kind of a friends and family approach because we're going to share that opportunity with people that are closest to us, people that we know, people that we trust, people we can feel confident in. And I would say at this stage, one of the challenges is now you have additional people that you have to start kind of managing and overseeing. And so usually here, people need to be able to start defining those responsibilities for other employees on their team. Maybe they have job descriptions, maybe they have some documented processes or tools to help their team members have success, but you want to make sure that you're communicating how do we actually do the work and who's responsible for what at that stage. Maybe you'll have some documented HR processes and policies on the people side. That's one of the things that we see companies start to need. And then on the finance side, you're really going to want to make sure that you have some good number of processes in place. And for sure, I would encourage you to have some good accountability and performance management processes as well. And then we'll move into that third stage, which we call casting the wider net. And so now you're really starting to get a little more maturity in your business, a little more stable. And so you may start to kind of reach a point where you've maxed out those people that are closest to you that you can bring into the business, right? We don't have any more new people, or maybe we've just gotten to a place where, the needs that we have are outside of the skill sets of the friends and family that we have. And so we're going to start to cast a wider net. A lot of times this will look like actively recruiting online. We'll start accepting applications. I would say that in the roofing industry specifically, here, everyone still really pitches in and wears a lot of hats. Other organizations may start to specialize a little bit more in this stage 3. So that is maybe an industry differentiator that I just want to point out, Brian, is that sometimes at that casting wider net for different businesses, I've seen them have more specialization. In the roofing industry, we get a lot done with fewer people. So still at this stage, typically everyone's kind of all hands on deck and we're all working hard together.
And then I like the revenue number that you have on this too. So the casting the wider net, that's typically between 4 and 10 million, right?
Yep.
The friends and family stage 2, typically you see it at 1.5 million to 4 million.
Yep.
And then the one person show, Chuck in a truck, that's 0 to 1.5 million. So, okay. So casting a wider net, 4 to 10 million. You went through all that. Anything else before you move on to the number 4, building to scale?
Sure. Yeah. So some things that can really help you have success to get ready for moving into that next stage, building to scale at that stage 3 would be things like prioritizing your hiring plans and really starting to define a staffing plan. So I work really closely with organizations, especially in this like moving from 3 to 4 stage, because a lot of times at this stage, talk about a new bicycle. This is like that regular bike to the 10 speed. Right. So if you think about the earlier stages, it's when you go from training wheels to your other bike or kind of that next size up, there's not as much of like a kind of overhaul as like the 10 speed is a lot more complex, right? Like you have to learn how to shift. And so I would say at like this 3 to 4, we often are kind of reforecasting their organizational model. So like their org chart. A lot of times we'll be looking at that and almost kind of re-envisioning what that org chart is going to look like as we get ready for scale. So that's probably one of the heaviest lifts that we do at that stage. Definitely getting pieces in place like your recruiting process, your onboarding process, and your training. Onboarding and training is an area that I see so just like under focused in organizations, right? We're going to bring them in and we consider onboarding like a 2 week period, right? It's like, okay, well, we helped you for 2 weeks. That's better than, Joe down the street. So good luck and go. And it's like,
Right.
boy, if we really want to have success, investing in training and onboarding can be really critical for your team members. And then with that, I would say really training your leaders too, so that they understand how to effectively manage people. I know that's not necessarily on here, but on this one, but it's really important.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you guys do a lot of work, I guess, probably at any of these stages, but on the finance part of it, the budget, the projection, the forecasting, like it is deep dive into that coming from the finance side of it, of like now these business owners are having much more clarity on their financials and metrics maybe related to the financials that make sense. That's a big piece of what you guys do too, correct?
Yeah, 100%. We have a whole dedicated coaching side to knowing your numbers, making sure that we have bookkeeping services that we provide
Okay.
to help with that. And so, yep, we've got the people side and we've got the money side. The
Yeah.
money side is entirely dedicated to it. So my partner, Jenny DuPoint, focuses on the money side. And what's great is we get to coach to kind of co-coach together so we can make these systems work really
Yeah.
well and effectively together.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you want to have really good, yeah, super good budgets and keep yourself from getting upside down in the roofing construction industry, especially. It's really easy to miss it on your cash flow. You have money
Sure.
coming in, and so it looks like you've got X
Yeah.
number of dollars in your bank account and you're flying high. But those production prices can change, labor can change, and all of a sudden you're upside down because you weren't managing your cash flow well. And that's a really important part that we try to help business owners have success in and just grow in their awareness of how to manage that better, how to be more knowledgeable around those pieces too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's probably most important when we talk finance is the whole cash flow piece because you got to actually have the dollars to pay your
Yeah.
team members and invest into. Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Especially in a seasonal business like ours where
Oh,
we're
true.
in the winter. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And then stage 4, that's where we're really starting to build to scale. So this is now we're in kind of that growth expansion stage where we're thinking about maybe some additional offices, maybe additional locations. In our industry, a lot of times I recommend kind of just doing like a satellite versus like a full
Oh,
branch. What I mean by that is like you might have a person who kind of really is dedicated. Maybe they live in an area that's quite a distance from your home location, but they really can work that different area, run things through, and then your main location becomes kind of your central hub for
sure.
everything versus investing in the cost of having a full dedicated location that's not always necessary. So just something to consider when you're looking at geographical expansion.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah, but so you might be looking at geographical expansion. You might be looking at expansion in your business of providing different services. So if you're a roofing company, maybe you're saying, oh, we've got equipment and things that would allow us to do Christmas lights, or maybe we're going to do ice dams, or maybe we're going to do re-roofs, or we're going to do just like roof care. Ugly roof is a product kind of known in our industry where it's more of a roof repair versus a full roof replacement. So there's different. Maybe you're doing gutters. We never did gutters before. Now we're doing decks. So that can be something that people will do at this stage. And I would say that really because now our organizations are getting more complex, it's super important for us to think about how we're going to specialize in our roles. We might also start to see more of that multi-layered organization where we before maybe we're more flat. Everybody was all hands in. Now we're going to have leaders leading leaders.
sure.
And then this is where typically in our industry, we see that around the 10 million plus mark, where we're getting to this actual growth stage and size. I'm always careful with owners and business owners to not try to get to 4 too fast. If you're in a 2, you don't necessarily want to be building your business like a four. So, what I mean by that is if you're still in the friends and family stage and you're adding in management too early, you
Yeah.
may be paying for really costly people that you could have waited until you
Yeah.
were established and a little more, you actually had a need. So by this stage, though, you definitely should have some team leaders who are overseeing different groups of your people. I always say a good kind of benchmark is like we can effectively manage 5 to 10 people per leader. And so I see a lot of organizations when they're at the stage four, sometimes even at stage three, where they have really robust sales teams and just one person kind of overseeing. That doesn't always mean that you have to add another manager, but you might layer in some leadership support, like through maybe a team lead, maybe you have
Sure.
mentors that you've identified. So there are different approaches that you can take, but you really do want to start to think about how can we give our people better leadership at this stage. So that might look like leadership development training, succession planning, and kind of advancement plans for your teams. And then, like I said, at this stage, if you can start to implement an actual learning management platform, like some software to
Sure.
help you through training and leadership, that can be really powerful.
And is that's obviously probably something that you help with understanding the technology that is really built for your audience, the roofing industry. Like I'm sure there's just like my industry, there's different CRMs to sales tools to the HR side of it to what's the inventory system? I'm trying to blank here. But you understand the technology that they likely are checking out and you could say, okay, this is a good fit. And actually, that was another just conversation we had recently. Is you made the comment that oftentimes, and I do this myself, we buy technology and we're not fully utilizing it.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure even just through the work that you're doing is understanding, okay, what tools do we have? Are we fully utilizing it?
Yeah, absolutely. The comment that I made for our listeners is that just like with our brains, like people always say we use 10% of our brain. I feel like we do the same thing with our technology. We, saw that new CRM and it's amazing and sparkly and it was worth all the dollars, right? But then we implement it and we're using 10% of the features that we paid
Yeah.
for. So yeah,
Yeah.
we love to help identify those opportunities for efficiency, to reduce costs, to find those ways to optimize what you already have. And I love that you brought that up, Brian, because I really do believe in doing more with less. I think that's one of the best ways that we can get more profit is to do more with less or do more with what we already have. And so if we can increase utilization, we can often increase profitability without having to make some major shifts.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then we get to the last stage, which is the legacy and exit. And this is really, I say, when you're ready for that next adventure in life. And that can look a lot of ways. Sometimes in our industry, that looks like someone passing down a business to either a new buyer, employees in their company, maybe a friend or family that member that they're passing it down to. Private equity is really big in our space right now. So sometimes that looks having a business that you've built that was scalable and sellable, and you created the value that you actually got looked at for that. And this is where the dollars change a little bit on the handout. So for
Right.
listeners who can't see it, really what I want to call out in this stage in terms of money is that a lot of times at this stage, it's really all about your EBITDA. And for those of us who don't know what EBITDA is, I just think about it like your net profit.
Yeah.
Your
That's
bottom
the
line
easiest.
dollars, what is your net profit? You really want to try to make sure you're optimizing your net profit at that legacy stage. So maybe you were doing 14 million in revenue on it, but you only made a million in profit. And somebody who's looking to buy or take on your business is going to be more appealing to have revenue that's maybe at 10 million, but 1.5 in it. So just thinking about your profit and bottom line really does matter a lot at that legacy and exit stage.
And I think what I would say to that too is maybe it would be more in stage three, casting a wider net. In my experience, like now your business has likely some enterprise value that you should at least start thinking through what does a potential exit look like? And the exit could be, I'm gonna do this for another 5, 10, 25 years and then shut it down. Okay. It could be, I really want this key employee or this child to take it over. Okay, let's build that up and have a transition of what that looks like. Or it could be to a third party or private equity and just to understand what that could potentially look like, especially on the private equity side when you start looking into, okay, looking at EBITDA. Okay, what is that? Maybe a target that we're shooting for, or maybe you don't have any care for that because you want to do something more internally. I think it's just helpful to understand how you're going to grow the business when you have an idea of what that exit option might be. And with that, I would also say is it's, and oftentimes you might say, hey, we've had business owners that like, you know what, we want to transfer to a key employee or to a child. And for whatever reason, a year later, that changes
Yeah.
because maybe they weren't a great fit, or maybe, quite honestly, just that third party or private equity is just paying a really attractive price tag,
Yeah.
especially when like it's first generation or even second generation of this is my baby. It's hard to part from that, but I think that's just something that you probably can really help with on the business side, where on the financial, the personal finance side of it is like, how does that impact your personal life is something that is relevant in the work that we both do.
Yeah, I love that, Brian. And it's so true. If for anybody listening, if you're not doing an annual strategic plan, I really, really encourage you to do that. And when I work with clients, we always start with that vision casting and reassessing. We set those, what are those 5 to 10 year goals? And usually when I'm working with owners, we're setting those from a business side, but we're also talking about those on the personal side. This is your business.
Sure.
You started it for a reason. And just like you said, it changes from year to year. When you were that
Yeah.
one person show and you were 25 years old, what you pictured for your future might be very different when you're now 35 and you've got a family and there are other people relying on you. Or maybe you don't have a family, but your priorities shift in a decade. And so
Mhm.
having those opportunities annually to reflect on where you wanted to go, and then
Mhm.
now, like, how do we think that might pivot a little bit?
Mhm.
Doing that on an annual basis is such a great process. And I'm sure, just like for you, Brian, like I would imagine your clients sit down with you on an annual basis to kind of reassess and reevaluate. So it's such an important, really, life practice that I would encourage people to do, is to carve out that time and really reflect on what matters to them, where do they want to go, and why are we here anyway? What are we doing this stuff for, right?
Yeah, and just reserve the right to pivot or change what
Yeah.
that vision looks like. Like that's totally okay,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't know what where life is going to take us. So if we have an openness to that, it actually makes the work that we do a lot easier, and it's not filled with anxiety if we just have an openness of what life may look like, right? We still have this ideal vision of what we want for our family and what we want for the business, but that could change, every
Yeah.
single year. And I said this again in a conversation we had before this airing was that like the ideal vision that we have often changes, but sometimes what we need help with when we're talking with either a business partner or a spouse is someone to facilitate that conversation around it. Is
Yeah.
that it doesn't always just naturally come up when you're talking to a business partner or maybe even a key employee or on our side with that spouse. And the values and the culture still might remain the same, but it's just now, okay, we actually need someone to facilitate this conversation. So that's something that I value when we hire our consultants in our industry is really we're paying them to facilitate conversations at time. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
All right, so let's go through. So if that business owner is wanting to scale, wants to start scaling, what are 3 steps they should take right now?
Yeah, I think it's simple. Step one would be to identify, where are you in your growth stage right now? Because
Okay.
again, you want to make sure that you're aligning your needs with the stage of your business. It would be like, if I'm trying to, model after that ideal spot, I often can get upside down because I'm implementing processes, people, things that are not the right fit for my little bicycle, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
identify that growth stage. Then I would say fix your biggest bottleneck, step two. So is this a people problem? Or is this processes problems? Is this a money problem? Is it a sales problem, right? Start to ask and identify, what are the biggest bottlenecks in your business? Where are you running into the barriers? Use the tool. Look at the list and look at those foundational elements that we're going to share with you, and maybe circle like, oh yeah, that's me. I definitely did not build that foundational element yet. at the stage that I'm in, because I'm going to want to have that foundational element in order to help me cross that barrier. And then three, I would say, is get expert guidance, or at least someone outside of yourself. Even if you don't work with me, talk to someone else, whether that's a mentor or a guide. Maybe that's an industry coach. Maybe it's a community of networking people that you have, but start to expand your thought outside of yourself. Working with an industry specific coach can really help you expedite that process, but at least start getting beyond yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think there's a lot of great work that business coaches that can be industry agnostic. I understand that. And we've hired them before as well. And then, but when someone completely understands your business, you get into the nitty gritty details that they understand. My world, it's a lot of like compliance stuff, right?
Yeah.
And in your world, it could be just a lot of this who we're hiring, the leadership piece, and again, and kind of the technology stuff.
Yeah.
And not to say that someone that is more a generalist can't do that, but like I've stumbled before where trying to just get over that from them to understand exactly what I do may take too long,
Right.
and I don't have the patience for that,
Yeah.
where I can understand where you have this target market and you are basically you're past that. You understand the industry, you understand the growing pains, and I get the whole idea of niching, and it just ultimately you're able to do more productive work on behalf
Yeah.
of the business owner. So I definitely get that. And something that we were talking about just recently that, maybe this would encourage our listeners to schedule something with you is how some of these business owners in roofing are using AI,
Mhm.
for productivity, for the whole hiring piece of it, for the marketing piece of it, of like, how can we plug into AI? Because we're all just figuring it out and like, hey, this is cool. But for you to actually see, hey, this is actually witness, this is where it can work.
Yeah.
I think just that advice alone of how does AI, how is it relevant to the roofing industry? So roofing
Yeah.
contractors. All right. So where can our listeners go if they want to learn more about working with you, Refinery, getting like expert coaching for their roofing business needs? What's the best thing to do?
Yeah, definitely to book a call. So schedule a call with me. There's a QR code on the handout that they can download. If you want to just scan that, it'll take you right to my Calendly link so that you can pick a time that works best for you. Really, by booking that call, I just want to be clear, like that it's not some like high pressured sales pitch. You really meet with me. Like I will be the one on that call. We'll talk about your business. And I love to like look under the hood of businesses. Like you mentioned with the industry specific, like one thing that's really cool about my job that I love is I've gotten to see how it's made at literally over 100 different roofing
Yeah.
businesses across our nation. And so it's there's such fun conversations. Like during that conversation, you will tell me how you're doing it, right? And I'll be able to use kind of my breadth of understanding how companies in our industry have been successful, those same challenges, how they overcame them. So in that call, it'll be an opportunity for just us to get to know each other a little bit and see if it's a good fit, but also for you to get some free advice on what you
Yeah.
can do right away for your business. I really try to make sure those calls are valuable. So let's connect and get that started. Yeah.
I love that. Well, I say something very similar that even in our initial consultations, like I'm quite confident that you're going to get some insight and some advice just from that no cost consultation. So in a way, it's silly not to explore this or find the time to do that.
Yeah.
Before we close, the one thing I was thinking that I couldn't remember, it was an ERP system. So I don't know if there's technology.
You found it.
I had to find
Yeah.
that. And is there anything else, Roz, that you want to close with or anything else our audience should know before we wrap up the show?
I don't think so, Brian. I really appreciate you having me on. I would just encourage companies, maybe that's what I'll say, is that we all experience as business owners these challenges. And so I would just encourage everyone listening to just give yourself grace, right? Give yourself grace. It's hard to be a business owner. We go through a lot of challenges, but the energy and excitement that comes with feeling like we have a solution. We can get through this challenge. Like we're taking the right steps forward.
Mhm.
I think that's where the value of partnering with other people and getting outside of yourself can really make the difference. So if you're in a spot where you're struggling, talk to somebody about it,
Yeah.
right? Go outside of yourself. And then for those of you that are out there crushing it, it's awesome. I love being a business owner. I'm sure you do too,
Yeah.
Brian. And it's so fulfilling and rewarding, and just wishing everybody the best of luck with their businesses.
Yeah. Because business ownership oftentimes is lonely, can be lonely, but it doesn't have to be. With
Yeah.
peer groups and with even just the coach that we have, it doesn't feel as lonely. And so
Yeah.
I value the work that you do. So Ross, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome. I think our audience will love it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Take care.